Stop the car! The words came out of Charles Smith's mouth before he even realized he was speaking. Through the windshield of his Mercedes, he saw something that made him forget about his important business meeting. A woman walking in the storm. Not running for shelter like any sane person would. Walking. Like she had somewhere to be and nothing, not even this hurricane-level rain, was going to stop her. "Sir?" his driver Marcus questioned. Charlie couldn't take his eyes off her. She was completely drenched, her thin jacket doing nothing against the rain. But there was something in the way she moved. Something that reminded him of his own mother, who used to walk to work every day no matter what. "Who walks 8 miles in weather like this?" Charlie whispered to himself. As their car passed her, the woman looked up for just a second. Their eyes met through the rain-covered window. In that brief moment, Charlie saw something that hit him like a punch to the gut. Determination, pride, and exhaustion so deep it made his heart ache. Then she was gone, swallowed by the storm behind them. Charlie sat back in his leather seat, but he couldn't shake what he'd just seen. Something told him this wasn't over. If you're curious about what happens when two very different worlds collide, make sure to like and subscribe. This story is just getting started. Sarah Jackson woke up at 4:30 a.m. to the sound of rain pounding against her small apartment window. She lay in bed for a moment, listening to the storm and calculating in her head. 8 miles. That's how far she had to walk to get to work today. The weather forecast had been calling for heavy rain all week, but Sarah couldn't afford to miss work. She hadn't missed a single day in 3 years, not even when she had the flu so bad she could barely stand. The Smith family depended on her, and more importantly, her 15-year-old daughter Keisha depended on the money she made cleaning their mansion. Sarah quietly got out of bed, careful not to wake Keisha, who was sleeping in the bedroom. They shared this tiny one-bedroom apartment in the roughest part of Atlanta, where the rent was cheap, but the neighborhood was dangerous. Sarah slept on the pull-out couch in the living room, giving Keisha the only bedroom so she could have privacy to study. In the small bathroom, Sarah looked at herself in the cracked mirror. At 42, she looked older than her years. The lines around her eyes told the story of too many early mornings, too many long walks, too many nights worrying about money. Her hands were rough and calloused from years of cleaning, scrubbing, and taking care of other people's homes while barely being able to maintain her own. But Sarah was proud of her work. She took care of the Smith mansion like it was her own home, maybe even better. Every surface sparkled, every room was perfectly organized, and she knew exactly how Mr. and Mrs. Smith liked everything done. In 3 years, she had never received a single complaint. Sarah put on her work uniform, a simple black dress that had seen better days, but was still clean and pressed. She had 2 uniforms and washed them by hand every other night, hanging them to dry in the bathroom. Her work shoes were falling apart, the soles worn thin from walking miles on concrete and asphalt, but they were all she had. She made herself a cup of instant coffee and a piece of toast, saving the rest of the bread for Keisha's lunch. Money was always tight, especially since Keisha had been diagnosed with asthma 2 years ago. The medications cost more than Sarah wanted to think about, and the doctor visits put them behind on bills every month. Sarah had lost her car 18 months ago when she couldn't keep up with the payments. At first, she had tried taking the bus to work, but even that became too expensive when her hours were cut back at the factory where she worked weekends. The Smith job was her main source of income now, $40 a day, 5 days a week. It wasn't much, but it kept them afloat. Walking to work had become routine. She left the apartment at 5:15 a.m. and arrived at the Smith mansion by 7:30 a.m., right on time to start her day. The walk took her through 3 different neighborhoods, starting in the rundown area where she lived, through a middle-class section, and finally into the wealthy suburb where the Smith family had their estate. This morning, the rain was worse than usual. Sarah pulled on her thin jacket, the only coat she owned, and grabbed her small backpack with her lunch and work supplies. She had learned to pack everything in plastic bags to keep them dry during the long walk. "Mama?" Keisha's voice came from the bedroom, groggy with sleep. "Go back to sleep, baby," Sarah called softly. "It's early." "Is it raining really bad?" Sarah looked out the window at the storm. The rain was coming down so hard she could barely see the streetlights. "Just a little rain. Nothing I can't handle." "Maybe you should call in sick today," Keisha said, coughing slightly. "You could catch pneumonia walking in that." Sarah's heart squeezed. Keisha was always worried about her, always suggesting she take days off or ask for help. But at 15, Keisha didn't understand how fragile their situation really was. One missed day of work could mean they couldn't buy groceries that week. "I'll be fine, sweetheart. You just focus on getting better and keeping up with your schoolwork." Sarah kissed her daughter goodbye and stepped out into the storm. The rain hit her like a wall of ice water. Within seconds, she was soaked through, her jacket providing no protection against the downpour. The wind whipped her hair across her face, and she had to squint to see where she was going. But Sarah started walking. She had made this journey in snow, in heat waves that made the asphalt soft under her feet, in thunderstorms that shook the ground. This was just another day. The first mile was always the hardest. Her neighborhood had broken sidewalks and poor street lighting, and in weather like this, it was dangerous. Cars couldn't see pedestrians clearly, and the roads flooded easily. Sarah walked as close to the buildings as possible, staying out of the way of traffic. By the second mile, her shoes were completely waterlogged, squishing with every step. Her socks were soaked, and she could feel blisters forming on her heels. But she kept walking, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. Mile 4 brought her to the edge of the wealthy suburb where the Smith family lived. The houses here were massive, with perfect lawns and circular driveways. Even in the rain, she could see the expensive cars parked behind iron gates and the soft glow of lights in windows where families were having breakfast together. By mile 5, Sarah's entire body was numb from the cold. The rain had gotten worse, if that was possible, and the wind was so strong she had to lean into it to keep moving forward. Cars passed her occasionally, their drivers safe and warm inside, probably never noticing the woman walking alone in the storm. Miles 6 and 7 were the longest. This was when Sarah's legs started to ache, when the blisters on her feet became painful, when the weight of her wet clothes made every step harder. But she had learned to push through the pain, to focus on her daughter and the money she would earn today. It was during mile 7 that she heard the car slowing down behind her. Sarah didn't turn around at first. Sometimes people slowed down to stare at her, probably wondering what kind of person walked in weather like this. She had learned to ignore the curious looks and keep moving. But this car was following her pace, staying just behind her. Finally, Sarah glanced over her shoulder and saw an expensive black Mercedes with tinted windows. Her heart started beating faster. The car pulled up beside her, and the passenger window rolled down. Sarah could see a man inside. Well-dressed, probably in his 50s, with gray hair and kind eyes. He looked concerned, not threatening. "Miss," he called out over the storm. "Miss, are you all right?" Sarah stopped walking but kept her distance from the car. "I'm fine, thank you." "You can't walk in this weather. Where are you going? Can I give you a ride?" Sarah studied the man's face. He seemed genuinely worried about her, not like someone who was trying to hurt her. But Sarah had learned to be careful about accepting help from strangers. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm almost where I need to be," she said politely. The man looked frustrated. "You're going to get sick. This storm is dangerous." "I'll be fine," Sarah said, starting to walk again. "Thank you for stopping." The car followed her for another block before the man finally gave up and drove away. Sarah felt a little bad for not accepting his help, but she had learned that it was better to depend on herself than to owe favors to people she didn't know. The final mile to the Smith mansion was the most challenging. The road was more exposed here, with fewer buildings to block the wind, and Sarah's legs felt like concrete, and she could barely feel her feet inside her waterlogged shoes. But she could see the lights of the mansion in the distance, and that gave her the strength to keep going. At exactly 7:30 a.m., Sarah walked through the back gate of the Smith estate. She was completely soaked, exhausted, and probably looked like she had been through a war. But she was on time, just like she had been every day for 3 years. What Sarah didn't know was that the man in the Mercedes hadn't given up. He had driven ahead and was now sitting in his driveway, watching through his window as she walked up to his back door. Charles Smith had just discovered that the woman he had tried to help in the storm was his own employee. Charles Smith sat in his home office, staring out the window at his perfectly manicured backyard, but his mind was nowhere near the quarterly report spread across his mahogany desk. All he could think about was the woman in the storm. It had been 2 hours since he watched Sarah Jackson walk through his back gate, soaking wet and exhausted. 2 hours since he realized that the woman he had tried to help on the highway was the same person who had been cleaning his house for 3 years, Sarah Jackson. He knew her name from the payroll, of course, but he had never really paid attention to her as a person. She was just part of the household staff, someone who kept his mansion spotless while he focused on running his business empire. Charlie employed dozens of people across his various companies and properties. They were all just names on a list to him. But now, Charlie couldn't stop thinking about what he had witnessed. Sarah had walked 8 miles in a hurricane just to get to work. 8 miles. Charlie's daily commute was a 20-minute ride in his air-conditioned Mercedes from his mansion to his downtown office building. He had never walked 8 miles in his entire life, let alone in weather that would keep most people locked inside their homes. Charlie picked up his phone and called down to the kitchen. "Mrs. Peterson, could you come to my office, please?" Elena Peterson had been the head housekeeper of the Smith household for over 15 years. She managed the entire domestic staff and knew everything that happened in the house. If anyone would know about Sarah's situation, it would be her. A few minutes later, Mrs. Peterson knocked on his office door. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Smith?" "Yes, please sit down. I wanted to ask you about Sarah Jackson." Mrs. Peterson's eyebrows rose slightly. "Sarah? Is there a problem with her work? Because I have to tell you, she's one of the best employees I've ever supervised." No problem with her work," Charlie said quickly. "I was just wondering, how does she get to work each day?" Mrs. Peterson looked confused by the question. "How does she get to work? I assume she drives, like everyone else." "Does she? Drive, I mean?" "Well, Mrs. Peterson paused, looking thoughtful. "Now that you mention it, I've never seen her car. She always arrives and leaves through the back gate, so I assume she parked on the street." "Why do you ask?" Charlie stood up and walked to the window. "I saw her this morning, walking in the storm. She was miles from here, completely soaked, but she kept walking like she had somewhere important to be." "Walking?" Mrs. Peterson's voice rose in surprise. "In this weather? That's impossible. Nobody walks that far in a storm like this." "She did," Charlie said firmly. "I offered her a ride, but she refused. I had no idea she worked for me until I saw her come through our gate 20 minutes later." Mrs. Peterson was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. "Mr. Smith, if Sarah is walking to work every day, that means, oh my goodness, she lives in the city, doesn't she? That's at least 8 miles from here." "That's what I calculated," Charlie said grimly. 8 miles each way, 16 miles total, every day she works. "But why wouldn't she tell me she needed help with transportation? I could have arranged something or helped her find a solution." Charlie turned to face his head housekeeper. "Mrs. Peterson, what do you know about Sarah's personal life? Her family? Her circumstances?" "Not much, I'm afraid," Mrs. Peterson admitted. "She's very private, very professional. I know she has a daughter because she's mentioned needing to leave on time to get home to her. But Sarah never complains about anything, never asks for favors or special treatment. She just does her job and does it perfectly." "How long has she been walking to work?" "I don't know. She's been with us for 3 years, and she's never been late, never missed a day. I just assumed—" Mrs. Peterson trailed off, looking troubled. "Mr. Smith, if she's been walking 8 miles to work every day for 3 years, rain or shine, that's incredible dedication." Charlie felt a knot forming in his stomach. Or incredible desperation. After Mrs. Peterson left, Charlie tried to focus on his work, but his concentration was shot. He kept thinking about Sarah trudging through the storm, her thin jacket offering no protection against the rain and wind. Around noon, Charlie decided to take a break. He walked downstairs to the main level of his house, something he rarely did during the day. Usually, he stayed in his office or left for meetings, paying little attention to the domestic activities happening around him. The house was spotless, as always. The floors gleamed, there wasn't a speck of dust anywhere, and fresh flowers had been arranged in every room. Charlie had always taken this level of cleanliness for granted, never really thinking about the work that went into maintaining it. He found Sarah in the living room, carefully dusting the expensive art pieces that lined the walls. She had changed out of her wet clothes into a dry uniform, but Charlie could see that her hair was still slightly damp. She worked methodically, giving each piece the attention it deserved. "Sarah?" Charlie called softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned around, and Charlie was struck by how tired she looked. Her eyes were weary, and there were dark circles beneath them that spoke of too many early mornings and too much stress. "Yes, Mr. Smith? Is there something you need?" "I just wanted to check that you made it to work safely this morning. The storm was pretty severe." Sarah's face remained politely neutral, but Charlie thought he saw a flicker of confusion in her eyes. "Yes, sir. I arrived on time as usual." Good. Charlie felt awkward, unsure how to continue the conversation. He rarely spoke to his household staff beyond basic pleasantries. "The forecast is calling for more rain this afternoon. I hope your ride home will be safe." Again, that flicker of something in Sarah's expression. "I'll be fine, Mr. Smith. Thank you for your concern." Charlie watched her return to her work, noting how carefully she handled each item, how much pride she seemed to take in doing the job well. This woman had walked 8 miles in a hurricane to get here, and now she was working as if nothing unusual had happened. He went back to his office, but he couldn't concentrate. By 2 p.m. he had made a decision. He called his assistant at the main office. "Janet, I need you to clear my schedule for the rest of the day. Something important has come up." While he waited for information about Sarah, Charlie found himself thinking about his own life. He lived in a 12,000 square foot mansion with more rooms than he could possibly use. He owned 3 cars, including the Mercedes that had cost more than most people made in a year. His closet was full of custom-made suits, and he had never in his life worried about where his next meal would come from. Yet somehow, he had been completely oblivious to the fact that one of his employees was walking 16 miles a day just to earn the money he probably spent on lunch without thinking twice. His phone buzzed with a text from Janet. Information sent to your email. Charlie opened the files and began reading. Sarah Jackson, age 42, employed as domestic staff for 3 years. Emergency contact, Keisha Jackson, daughter, age 15. Address, 412 Maple Street, apartment 3B. Charlie pulled up the address on his computer and felt his heart sink. Maple Street was in one of the roughest neighborhoods in Atlanta, the kind of place where people worked multiple jobs just to afford rent on tiny apartments. He looked at Sarah's employment record. Perfect attendance for 3 years. No complaints, no incidents, no requests for time off or advances on her salary. She earned $200 a week, which Charlie realized was barely enough to cover basic living expenses, especially with a teenage daughter. The more Charlie learned, the more ashamed he felt. Not ashamed of Sarah. He was developing a deep respect for her strength and dedication. He was ashamed of himself, of his own blindness to the struggles of the people who worked for him. At 5 p.m., Charlie made another decision. He was going to drive Sarah home. He found her in the kitchen, helping Mrs. Peterson prepare for the evening meal service. The storm had gotten worse throughout the day, and rain was still pounding against the windows. "Sarah," Charlie said, "I'd like to offer you a ride home today. The weather is still pretty bad." Sarah looked surprised and a little uncomfortable. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Smith, but I don't want to trouble you. I'll be fine walking." "It's no trouble at all. I insist." Sarah glanced at Mrs. Peterson, who nodded encouragingly. "Mr. Smith is right, dear. This storm is dangerous. You should accept his offer." Reluctantly, Sarah agreed. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate it." 20 minutes later, Charlie and Sarah were sitting in his Mercedes as Marcus, his driver, navigated through the stormy streets toward Sarah's neighborhood. The ride was mostly quiet, with Sarah giving polite directions and Charlie trying to think of what to say. As they got closer to Sarah's address, Charlie watched the neighborhood change. The houses got smaller, the streets got rougher, and the signs of poverty became more obvious. When they finally stopped in front of Sarah's building, Charlie was shocked by what he saw. The apartment complex was run down and obviously neglected. Several windows were boarded up, the parking lot was full of potholes, and the building looked like it hadn't been properly maintained in years. "This is it," Sarah said, reaching for the door handle. "Thank you so much for the ride, Mr. Smith." "Sarah, wait," Charlie said impulsively. "Can I ask you something?" She turned back to face him, waiting politely. "How long have you been walking to work?" Sarah's face went carefully neutral. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir." "I think you do," Charlie said gently. "I saw you this morning, walking in the storm. That was you on Highway 285, wasn't it?" Sarah's shoulders sagged slightly, and for the first time, her professional mask slipped. "Yes, sir. That was me." "How long?" Charlie asked again. "About 18 months, Sarah said quietly. "Since I lost my car." Charlie felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. 18 months. She had been walking 16 miles a day for a year and a half, and he had never known. "Why didn't you ask for help? Why didn't you tell Mrs. Peterson you needed transportation assistance?" Sarah's chin lifted with pride. "I don't ask for charity, Mr. Smith. I earn my pay, and I do my job well. How I get to work is my responsibility." Charlie stared at this remarkable woman who had just taught him more about dignity and strength in 5 minutes than he had learned in his entire privileged life. "Sarah," he said, "we need to talk." Sarah Jackson sat uncomfortably in the back seat of the Mercedes, feeling completely out of place in the luxury vehicle. The leather seats probably cost more than she made in a month, and she was terrified of getting them wet or dirty with her work clothes. "Sarah," Charlie said again, "we really need to talk. Would you mind if I came up for just a few minutes? I promise I won't take much of your time." Sarah's eyes widened with panic. "Mr. Smith, my apartment it's not suitable for someone like you. It's very small and—" "I don't care about that," Charlie said gently. "I just want to understand your situation better so I can help." "I don't need help," Sarah said quickly, that familiar pride rising in her voice. "I'm managing just fine on my own." Charlie looked at this woman who had just walked 8 miles in a hurricane and was now sitting in his car trying to convince him she didn't need help. He was beginning to understand that Sarah's pride was both her greatest strength and her biggest obstacle. "Please," Charlie said, "just 5 minutes. I think there are some things we should discuss." Sarah hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "All right. But my daughter is probably doing homework, so we'll need to be quiet." They got out of the car and Charlie followed Sarah up 2 flights of stairs in the dimly lit apartment building. The hallway smelled like old food and mildew, and Charlie could hear arguments and loud music coming from behind various doors. This was a world completely foreign to him. Sarah unlocked a door marked 3B and stepped inside. "Keisha," she called softly. "I'm home, baby." "Mama!" A teenage girl appeared in the doorway of what must be the bedroom. She was tall and thin like her mother, with intelligent eyes and a smile that lit up her whole face when she saw Sarah. "You're home early, and you're not soaking wet for once." Charlie stood awkwardly in the doorway as Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead. "Mr. Smith gave me a ride home because of the storm. Keisha, this is my employer, Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, this is my daughter, Keisha." Keisha's eyes widened as she took in Charlie's expensive suit and the general air of wealth about him. "Nice to meet you, sir," she said politely, though Charlie could see the curiosity in her expression. "It's very nice to meet you too, Keisha," Charlie said, stepping into the small apartment. The space was tiny, smaller than Charlie's walk-in closet, but it was incredibly clean and organized. The living room contained just a fold-out couch, a small table, and an old television. The kitchen was barely big enough for one person, with outdated appliances and cabinets that had seen better days. But despite the poverty, everything was spotless and well-maintained. "Keisha, honey, why don't you finish your homework while Mr. Smith and I talk?" Sarah suggested. "Okay, Mama. Nice meeting you, Mr. Smith." Keisha disappeared back into the bedroom, leaving Charlie and Sarah alone. Sarah gestured toward the small couch. "Please, sit down. Can I get you something to drink? I have water, or I could make some coffee." "Water is fine, thank you," Charlie said, though he suspected Sarah couldn't really afford to share her food or drinks with unexpected guests. Sarah brought him a glass of water and sat on the edge of the couch, looking nervous. "Mr. Smith, if this is about my work performance, I want you to know that I always give my best effort. If there's something I'm not doing to your satisfaction—" "Sarah, stop," Charlie said gently. "This isn't about your work performance. Your work is excellent. This is about the fact that you've been walking 16 miles a day to do that excellent work, and I never knew about it." Sarah's face flushed with embarrassment. "I told you, how I get to work is my responsibility. I've never been late, and I've never missed a day. I know that, and I'm amazed by your dedication. But Sarah, what you're doing isn't sustainable. Walking 8 miles each way, every day, in all kinds of weather. You're going to make yourself sick." "I'm fine," Sarah said defensively. "I'm strong, and I can handle it." Charlie looked around the small apartment, taking in the details that told the story of their struggles. The furniture was old, but well cared for. There were no luxuries, no cable TV, no modern electronics, no decorations that weren't strictly necessary. But there were books everywhere, which told him that education was important to this family despite their financial situation. "Sarah, can I ask you a personal question?" She nodded hesitantly. "When did you lose your car?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. 18 months ago. I was working 2 jobs, cleaning houses during the day and working at a factory on weekends. But then Keisha got sick with asthma, and the medical bills started piling up. I had to choose between keeping the car and buying her medication. Charlie felt his heart clench. "You chose your daughter's health over your transportation." "Of course I did," Sarah said, as if there had never been any other option. "What kind of mother would I be if I didn't? And since then, you've been walking to work every day." "At first, I tried taking the bus, but it was still expensive, and the route didn't go directly to your neighborhood. The walk actually takes less time than the bus with all the transfers. And—" Sarah hesitated. "And what?" "And the bus fare for a month costs the same as a week's worth of Keisha's asthma medication. So I walk." Charlie was quiet, processing this information. This woman had been making impossible choices every day for 18 months, choosing between her own comfort and her daughter's health, between transportation and medicine, between her physical well-being and her family's survival. "Sarah, how much do I pay you?" $200 a week, sir." Charlie did quick math in his head. $200 a week came to about $10,400 a year. He probably spent more than that on clothes. The wine in his personal cellar was worth more than Sarah's annual salary. "And that's your only income?" "I still work at the factory on weekends when they need extra help. That brings in maybe another $50 a week when it's available." So Sarah was supporting herself and her daughter on roughly $13,000 a year, in a city where the average rent alone was more than that. Charlie was beginning to understand the impossible mathematics of Sarah's life. "Can I ask about Keisha's father?" Sarah's expression hardened slightly. "He's not in the picture. It's just been Keisha and me since she was born." Charlie looked toward the bedroom where Keisha was doing her homework. "She seems like a bright kid." Sarah's face immediately softened, and the pride in her voice was unmistakable. "She's brilliant. She's in all advanced classes, and she wants to be a doctor someday. She works so hard at school, even when she's not feeling well because of her asthma. That's wonderful. She must get her intelligence and determination from her mother. Sarah blushed at the compliment. I just want her to have opportunities I never had. I want her to go to college, to have a career, to never have to worry about choosing between medicine and bus fare. Charlie was silent for a moment, thinking about everything Sarah had told him. Here was a woman who was literally sacrificing her health and comfort every single day to provide for her daughter and to do her job well. She had never complained, never asked for special treatment, never made her problems anyone else's responsibility. Sarah, Charlie said carefully, what would you say if I told you I wanted to help you get a car? Sarah's back stiffened immediately. I would say thank you, but no, I don't accept charity. What if it wasn't charity? What if it was a work-related benefit? I don't understand. Charlie had been thinking about this during the drive to her apartment. What if I told you that I was concerned about the reliability of my staff's transportation, and that I wanted to provide company vehicles for key employees? Sarah looked suspicious. You don't provide company cars for any of your other employees. Maybe I should start. Sarah, you're one of the most reliable, dedicated employees I've ever had. You've never missed a day of work in 3 years. You take better care of my home than I do. You deserve support, not charity. Sarah was quiet, clearly torn between her pride and her practical needs. Mr. Smith, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I can't accept a car from you. It wouldn't be right. Why not? Because I haven't earned it. I'm just doing my job. Charlie leaned forward. Sarah, let me tell you something. I run a company with over 500 employees. I pay some of them six-figure salaries to do jobs that are less important than what you do. I have executives who complain if they have to work late one night, while you've been walking 8 miles in hurricanes without saying a word. He paused, making sure she was listening. You haven't just earned a car, Sarah. You've earned my respect, my admiration, and my commitment to making sure you're treated fairly. What you've been doing for the past 18 months isn't just dedication, it's heroic. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, though she tried to hide it. Mr. Smith, I don't know what to say. Say you'll let me help. Not because you need charity, but because you deserve support. Because Keisha deserves to have a mother who doesn't have to risk her health just to get to work. From the bedroom, they could hear Keisha coughing, the harsh, persistent cough that came with asthma. Sarah's attention immediately turned toward the sound, and Charlie could see the worry etched on her face. How is she doing? With her asthma? She's managing, Sarah said, but Charlie could hear the concern in her voice. The medication helps, but it's expensive, and she can't do some of the things other kids her age do. She can't run track, which she wanted to try. What about her college plans? You said she wants to be a doctor. Sarah's face lit up again. She's so smart, Mr. Smith. Her grades are perfect, and her teachers say she has real potential. But college? I don't know how we're going to afford it. I'm trying to save money, but with the medical expenses and just day-to-day living. Charlie made another decision. Sarah, I want to help with Keisha's education too. Mr. Smith, no. I can't let you do that. Why not? I spend money on things I don't need all the time. Why can't I spend money on something that actually matters? On helping a brilliant young woman become a doctor? Sarah was crying now, though she was trying to hide it. Why are you doing this? Why do you care? Charlie thought about how to answer that question. The truth was complicated. Part of it was guilt, shame at his own blindness to Sarah's struggles. Part of it was admiration for her strength and character. But mostly, it was because he had finally met someone who embodied the values he claimed to believe in, but had never really practiced. Because, Charlie said finally, you've shown me what real integrity looks like. You've shown me what it means to be truly dedicated to something bigger than yourself. And because I have the power to help, which means I have the responsibility to help. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I don't know how to accept this kind of generosity. You don't have to do anything except keep being the amazing person you already are. Keep taking care of your daughter. Keep doing the excellent work you do every day, and let me worry about the rest. Keisha appeared in the doorway, looking concerned. Mama, are you okay? Sarah quickly composed herself. I'm fine, baby. Mr. Smith we were just discussing some work arrangements. Keisha looked between her mother and Charlie, clearly sensing that something important was happening, but not sure what. Charlie stood up. I should let you both get back to your evening. Sarah, I'll see you at work tomorrow, and we can discuss the details of what we talked about. Mr. Smith, Sarah said, standing as well. I still don't feel right about accepting so much help. Then don't think of it as accepting help, Charlie said. Think of it as letting me finally do what I should have done a long time ago. Taking care of the people who take care of me. As Charlie walked back down to his car, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He felt useful. Not just wealthy, not just successful, but actually useful to someone who mattered. And for the first time in his life, he understood the difference. 3 weeks had passed since Charlie's visit to Sarah's apartment, and the changes had been dramatic. True to his word, Charlie had arranged for a company car, a reliable used Honda that was perfect for Sarah's needs. At first, she had protested again, insisting it was too much, but Charlie had presented it as a business necessity. "Sarah," he had explained, "I can't have my most valuable employee exhausting herself walking 16 miles a day. It affects productivity, and more importantly, it affects your health and safety. This car comes with the job." The transformation in Sarah's daily routine was immediate. Instead of waking up at 4:30 a.m. to begin her long walk, she could now wake up at 6:30 a.m. and still arrive at work early. Instead of spending 3 hours a day walking, she now had 3 extra hours to spend with Keisha, to rest, or to take care of other responsibilities. But the biggest change wasn't in Sarah's schedule. It was in Charlie himself. For the first time in years, Charlie found himself genuinely interested in the lives of his employees. He started paying attention to the people who worked in his house, learning their names, asking about their families, understanding their situations. What he discovered shocked him. Marcus, his driver, had been sending most of his salary back to the Philippines to support his elderly parents and to pay for his younger brother's medical school. Elena Peterson, his head housekeeper, was caring for her disabled husband while trying to save money for retirement on a salary that barely covered their expenses. James, the gardener, was working 2 other jobs to pay for his daughter's wedding. Every person who worked for Charlie had a story, had struggles, had dreams that went far beyond their daily duties, and Charlie had been oblivious to all of it. One morning, Charlie found Sarah in his home office, carefully dusting his extensive book collection. She looked healthier than she had in weeks. The dark circles under her eyes were fading, and she moved with more energy. "Good morning, Sarah," Charlie said, settling behind his desk. "How's the car working out?" Sarah's face lit up with a smile that was becoming more common. "It's wonderful, Mr. Smith. I can't thank you enough. Yesterday, I was able to pick Keisha up from school instead of her having to take the bus. She was so excited to ride in our car. I'm glad to hear it. And how is Keisha doing with her asthma?" "Much better, actually. The doctor says the stress reduction is helping. She's been sleeping better, and her cough has improved a lot." Charlie had also quietly arranged for the company's health insurance to cover both Sarah and Keisha, though he had presented it as an expansion of benefits for all full-time employees. Keisha's asthma medication was now fully covered, removing one more financial burden from Sarah's shoulders. "Sarah," Charlie said, "I wanted to talk to you about something else. I've been thinking about Keisha's college plans." Sarah paused in her dusting. "Mr. Smith, you've already done so much." "Just hear me out," Charlie interrupted gently. "I've been researching scholarship programs, and there are several that Keisha would be perfect for. But most of them require applications to be submitted during junior year of high school. Since she's already in her sophomore year, we need to start preparing now." Sarah set down her cleaning supplies and gave Charlie her full attention. "What kind of preparation?" "Well, first, we need to make sure she's taking the right courses. Advanced placement classes, science prerequisites for pre-med programs, that sort of thing. Second, we need to get her involved in extracurricular activities that will look good on college applications. And third, we need to start preparing her for standardized tests." Charlie had spent hours researching this, something he never would have bothered with just a month ago. But something about Keisha's bright, determined spirit reminded him of his own daughter, who had died in a car accident 15 years ago. Helping Keisha felt like honoring his daughter's memory. "All of that sounds expensive," Sarah said quietly. "That's where I come in," Charlie said. "I want to establish an education fund for Keisha, not just for college, but for everything she needs between now and then. Test prep courses, application fees, tutoring if she needs it." Sarah sat down heavily in the chair across from Charlie's desk. "Mr. Smith, I don't understand why you're doing all this. We're not your responsibility." Charlie had been asking himself the same question. The answer had come to him gradually, through conversations with Sarah and observations of her character. "Do you know what I've learned about you over the past few weeks, Sarah?" She shook her head. "I've learned that you're one of the most principled people I've ever met. You've been in desperate financial situations, but you've never stolen from me, never taken shortcuts in your work, never compromised your integrity. You've been exhausted and stressed, but you've never taken that out on anyone else." Charlie paused, choosing his words carefully. "Most people in my position, wealthy people, we like to think we deserve what we have because we work hard. But the truth is, I've never worked as hard as you do. I've never sacrificed as much as you have. I've never shown the kind of character under pressure that you show every single day." Sarah's eyes were getting misty, but she listened intently. "So, when you ask why I'm helping you, the answer is simple. Because you've earned it. Because your daughter has earned it. And because I finally understand that having the ability to help means I have the obligation to help." There was a long moment of silence before Sarah spoke. "Mr. Smith, there's something I need to tell you." "What is it?" "I've been offered another job, a family in Buckhead. They want me to work for them full-time, and they're offering $300 a week." Charlie felt his stomach drop. The thought of losing Sarah hadn't occurred to him, but now he realized how much he had come to depend on her presence in his life. Not just for her work, but for the sense of purpose her story had given him. "Are you planning to take it?" he asked carefully. "A month ago, I would have said yes immediately. An extra $100 a week would have changed our lives. But now," Sarah hesitated, "now I don't know. You've been so kind to us, so generous. It would feel wrong to leave after everything you've done." "Sarah," Charlie said firmly, "you should never make a career decision based on gratitude. If this other job is better for you and Keisha, you should take it. But what about you? What about all the plans we've made for Keisha's education?" Charlie thought for a moment. "The education fund isn't tied to your job with me. That's for Keisha, regardless of where you work. As for me, well, I'll miss having you here, but I want what's best for your family." Sarah looked surprised by his response. "You're not angry that I'm considering leaving?" "Of course not. I'm proud of you for having options now. A month ago, you were trapped by circumstances. Now you can make choices based on what you actually want, not just what you need to survive." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, then smiled. "You know what, Mr. Smith? I think I want to stay here." "Are you sure? That's a significant amount of money you'd be giving up." "It is," Sarah agreed. "But money isn't everything. Working for you, it's become more than just a job. You've become invested in our lives, in our future. The other family, they're just looking for someone to clean their house. You're looking out for me and Keisha as people." Charlie felt a warmth in his chest that he hadn't experienced in years. "I'm honored that you want to stay, Sarah, but I insist on matching their salary offer. You shouldn't have to choose between financial security and job satisfaction." "Mr. Smith, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do," Charlie said. "Not because I'm being generous, but because you're worth it. You're worth far more than $300 a week, actually. But it's a start." That afternoon, Charlie found himself doing something he had never done before. He called his lawyer to discuss changing his employment practices across all his businesses. "David," he said when his attorney answered, "I want to review the compensation and benefits packages for all my employees. Not just the executives, everyone. Cleaning staff, maintenance workers, drivers, everyone." "That's going to be a significant undertaking, Charlie. What's prompted this?" Charlie looked out his office window where he could see Sarah carefully tending to the flowers in his garden. A task that wasn't technically part of her job description, but something she did because she took pride in making his home beautiful. "I've realized that I've been running my businesses like I'm just responsible for profits and shareholders. But I'm responsible for people's lives, people's families, people's futures. And I haven't been taking that responsibility seriously enough." "This could be expensive," David warned. "Good," Charlie said. "I'd rather be a business owner who makes slightly less profit because I'm treating my employees fairly than one who makes maximum profit while people who work for me struggle to pay for basic necessities." Over the next few days, Charlie implemented several changes. He increased wages across the board for his lowest paid employees. He expanded health insurance coverage to include families. He established an emergency fund that employees could access for unexpected medical bills or other crises. But the change that meant the most to him was much smaller and more personal. Every morning now, when Sarah arrived at work, Charlie made sure to greet her personally. Not because he needed anything from her, but because he had learned to value her as a person whose presence made his life better. And every evening, when Sarah left in her reliable Honda, Charlie felt a satisfaction that all his business successes had never provided. He was finally using his wealth and position to make a real difference in the world, one person at a time. Sarah's story had taught him that true success wasn't measured by how much you accumulated for yourself, but by how much you lifted up the people around you. For the first time in his life, Charlie felt genuinely successful, but the biggest changes were still to come. 1 year later, Charlie Smith stood at the podium of the Atlanta Business Council's annual meeting, looking out at an audience of the city's most successful entrepreneurs and executives. He had been invited to speak about innovative employee relations, a topic that would have seemed ridiculous to him just 18 months ago. "Ladies and gentlemen," Charlie began, "I want to tell you about the day my business philosophy changed forever." It was a rainy Tuesday morning, and I was sitting in my car, watching a woman walk 8 miles to work in a hurricane. In the audience, Charlie could see some puzzled faces. These were people who measured success in quarterly profits and stock prices. The idea that watching someone walk to work could be transformative probably seemed absurd to them. That woman was Sarah Jackson, and she worked for me. For 3 years, she had been one of my most reliable employees, cleaning my home, maintaining my property, and doing excellent work every single day. And for 3 years, I had been completely oblivious to the fact that she was walking 16 miles a day because she couldn't afford a car. Charlie paused, letting that sink in. Sarah's story taught me something that no business school ever could. It taught me that behind every employee is a human being with dreams, struggles, and responsibilities that extend far beyond their job description. And it taught me that as employers, we have a choice. We can see our workers as expenses to be minimized, or we can see them as investments in our community's future. Charlie clicked to his first slide, showing productivity and retention statistics from his various businesses. When I started implementing fair wage practices, comprehensive benefits, and employee support programs, something interesting happened. Productivity increased, turnover decreased, employee satisfaction soared. But more importantly, I started building a workforce of people who were genuinely invested in the success of our companies because they knew we were invested in their success. After his speech, Charlie drove home through the same neighborhoods he had traveled with Sarah that stormy day over a year ago. But now, when he looked at the rundown apartment buildings and struggling communities, he didn't just see poverty, he saw potential. Charlie had established the Sarah Jackson Foundation 6 months ago, focused on providing transportation assistance and educational support for working families. The foundation had already helped dozens of people get reliable cars, paid for college application fees for promising students, and created emergency funds for families facing medical crises. As Charlie pulled into his driveway, he saw Sarah's Honda parked in its usual spot. She had been promoted to head of household operations, overseeing all domestic staff across Charlie's properties. Her salary had tripled, and she now had her own office in Charlie's business complex. But the biggest change was in Sarah herself. The exhausted, desperate woman who had once walked miles in the rain had been replaced by a confident professional who spoke up in meetings, contributed ideas for improving operations, and mentored other employees who were facing difficulties. Charlie found Sarah in the kitchen, discussing meal planning with the chef for an upcoming charity dinner. "How did the speech go?" Sarah asked when she saw him. "Good, I think. Several business owners came up afterward asking about implementing similar programs in their companies." Sarah smiled. "Keisha will be excited to hear that. She's been writing her senior project about the economic benefits of fair labor practices. She said she wants to use your companies as a case study." Charlie's face lit up at the mention of Keisha. The shy, brilliant 15-year-old he had met in that tiny apartment had blossomed into a confident young woman who was now a senior in high school. Her grades were perfect. Her college applications were submitted to top universities, and her essay about overcoming adversity to pursue her dreams of becoming a doctor had moved Charlie to tears. "Speaking of Keisha," Charlie said, "I have some news. I heard from the admissions office at Emory University today." Sarah's face went pale. "Oh no. Was it a rejection? I knew it was a long shot, but we hoped—" "Sarah," Charlie interrupted with a grin. "She got in, full scholarship, pre-med program." Sarah's hands flew to her mouth and tears started streaming down her face. "She got in? She really got in?" "She really did. And not just got in. They want her so badly, they're offering her a full ride plus a stipend for living expenses. The admissions officer said her application was one of the most compelling they'd ever received." Sarah was crying too hard to speak. Charlie pulled out his phone and showed her the official email from Emory. "Does she know yet?" Sarah finally managed to ask. "I wanted you to be the one to tell her. This is your victory too, Sarah. All those years of sacrifice, all those miles you walked, all those times you chose her needs over your own. This is what it was all for." That evening, the three of them, Charlie, Sarah, and Keisha, sat in Charlie's living room celebrating Keisha's acceptance to medical school. It had become a tradition for them to have dinner together once a week, a tradition that had started when Charlie realized he enjoyed their company more than most of his wealthy friends. "I can't believe this is really happening," Keisha said, reading the acceptance letter for the 10th time. 2 years ago, I thought college was just a dream. Now I'm going to be a doctor." "You were always going to be a doctor," Charlie said. "You just needed the opportunity to show the world what your mother and I already knew, that you're extraordinary." Keisha looked at Charlie with affection that had grown over the past year. "Mr. Smith, I want you to know that you didn't just change our lives. You showed me what it looks like when someone with power chooses to use it to help others. That's the kind of doctor I want to be. That's the kind of person I want to be." Charlie felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Keisha, you're already that kind of person. You learned that from your mother, long before you met me." Sarah reached over and squeezed Charlie's hand. You know what the funny thing is? I used to think that walking all those miles was the hardest thing I'd ever done. But now I realize it was the best thing that ever happened to us. If I hadn't been walking that day, if you hadn't seen me in the storm, none of this would have happened. I've thought about that too, Charlie said. But I think we would have found each other somehow. People like you, people with real character, they have a way of revealing themselves eventually. I just got lucky that I was paying attention that day. 6 months later, Charlie stood in the parking lot of Sarah's old apartment building, watching a construction crew tear down the rundown complex. The lot would soon be home to affordable housing units that Charlie's foundation was building. Safe, clean apartments for working families who deserved better than what they could currently afford. Sarah stood next to him, wearing a professional suit and carrying a tablet with construction updates. She had become the foundation's director of community outreach, using her understanding of poverty and struggle to design programs that actually helped people. "It's strange being here," Sarah said, looking at the building where she had once lived. "I have so many memories of that little apartment. Some of them were hard, but it was home." "What was the hardest part?" Charlie asked. Sarah thought for a moment. "The feeling that no matter how hard I worked, how much I sacrificed, it would never be enough. That Keisha would be trapped in the same cycle I was. That's what hopelessness really is. Not just being poor, but believing that being poor is permanent." "And now?" Sarah smiled, watching families walk by who would soon be moving into the new housing units. "Now I know that circumstances can change, but only if someone is willing to take a chance on you. You took a chance on us, Charlie, and now we're taking chances on other people." As they drove back toward Charlie's house, which had become as much Sarah's workplace as her employer's home, Charlie reflected on how completely his life had changed. His business empire was more profitable than ever, but profit was no longer his primary motivation. His employees were happier, more loyal, and more productive. His foundation was making real differences in real people's lives. But the biggest change was personal. For the first time in years, Charlie felt like his life had meaning beyond just accumulating wealth. "Sarah," Charlie said as they pulled into the driveway, "I have something I want to ask you." "What is it?" "I'm thinking about writing a book about what I've learned this past year, about how changing the way I treat employees changed everything about my business and my life. Would you be willing to co-author it with me?" Sarah looked surprised. "Me?" "Charlie, I'm not a writer. You're a storyteller. You've been telling me your story for over a year now, and it's the most powerful story I know. I think other business owners need to hear it, and they need to hear it from you." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "What would we call it?" Charlie had been thinking about this. "How about the 8-Mile Walk? What I learned about success from the woman who walked to work." "I like it," Sarah said. "But I have one condition." "What's that?" "All the proceeds go to the foundation, to help more families like mine." Charlie grinned. "I wouldn't have it any other way." As they walked into the house together, no longer employer and employee, but partners in something much more important, Charlie thought about that rainy morning when he had first seen Sarah walking in the storm. He had thought he was just witnessing someone's desperation. Instead, he had been given a glimpse of true courage, true dedication, and true strength. Sarah had taught him that real success wasn't measured by what you accumulated, but by what you gave back. She had shown him that the people who deserve help the most are often the ones who ask for it the least. And most importantly, she had proven that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply notice someone who has been invisible and choose to see their worth. In the end, Charlie had set out to help Sarah, but Sarah had been the one who saved him from a life of meaningless wealth, from the emptiness of success without purpose, from the blindness that comes with privilege. The woman who had once walked 8 miles in a hurricane to clean his house had ended up teaching him what it really meant to be rich. And for that lesson, Charlie knew he would be grateful for the rest of his life.